Okay, let's say that this pile here represents 50,000 incidences, but I'm going to use 2,500 incidences where a private citizen had to use their firearm and was successful. 2,500. And out of these 2,500 incidences, we learn certain trends or certain things that keep popping up, and I'll tell you what they are. Most of these 2,500 did not train other than just bullseye, getting familiar with the firearm, okay? And yet 2,500 were successful in their defense situation, which means the outcome is they didn't die. They survived their incident. Caliber wasn't a factor. If caliber was a factor in these 2,500, certainly, don't you know that people would say, well, the 22 isn't that good for defense, right? At least that's what they say. But the research done by Claude Warner and other people have shown that there's no more defense losses by a 22 than with a 9mm, because it's the person behind the gun and how they use the gun that matters, not necessarily the caliber. Now, 9mm is more powerful than a 22, but it's where you put the damage, it's where you put the shots that counts. So caliber was not a factor in this. So if somebody had a 22 pistol, chances are that a lot of these probably, the perps fled. And that's one thing I forgot to mark down here, is usually within these 2,500 incidences, we see that the perps or perpetrators flee. And I'm writing this down off camera here. So I'm going to read this to you one more time so we can get this going here. In other words, many times the shot wasn't even fired, okay? And let's say a shot was fired and the person missed. The perps would still run away. Let's say that a shot was fired and it hit one of the perps. They still would run away. That kind of thing. That's usually what happens in most defense situations. It's a break in contact. Okay, I'm going to go through these again because I had to add that one there. Okay, most didn't train other than just bullseye. That means they got the firearm, they kind of broke it in and trained a little bit and then kind of got it, let it get dusty and stuff like that. Caliber wasn't a factor. We already talked about that. Caliber wasn't a factor because of the weak 22, which was, more than half of these incidences where a person just had a simple 22 in their house in a home invasion, then we would see people dying from using the 22, but we don't see it that often. Capacity, no mag change. Okay, for these 2,500 incidences, there was no capacity, there was no mag change, which means capacity wasn't a big deal. Same thing with the revolvers. Capacity wasn't a big deal. Gunfight only lasted a few seconds. Okay, so when a gunfight happens with the perps, usually it happens very quickly. Because why? They're running because let's say that these guys are the perps, although they're for an example over here later on. Let's say that these two guys were the guys that wanted to attack you. Most of the time, whenever they hear a shot fired or they see the gun, they're going to take off. So the gunfight was only a few seconds and these guys took off. Okay, capacity wasn't a factor, which means that you're shooting maybe one shot or something and usually run out of time before you run out of ammo because these guys are already long gone, unless you're praying and spraying. And praying and spraying isn't a good tactic. Nobody should pray and spray. Okay, there was at least one piece of cover. So let's say if this was a piece of cover right here, he would be behind cover. And he could use that cover, and cover was available in them 2,500 incidences because most of the incidences happened around objects where you can find cover. So there was cover, one piece of cover. Okay. Most of these events, these 2,500, even though, like I said, this is probably more like 50,000, I'm just giving you 2,500 here just for a sample. Most of this happened within 7 yards. So 7 yards isn't a very long distance, which means that, your accuracy doesn't have to be perfect. Although the saying is speed is fine, but accuracy is final. If you can get the gun out fast and get one shot on the perp, even though it's not a lethal shot, and you hit him, chances are he's gone, or chances are you startled him enough to have enough time to correct your shots and finally get the proper shot placement. Center mass, head, stuff like that. So there was at least one piece of cover within 7 yards. The perps flee. Okay, in most of these incidences, every 2,500 incidences, since the gunfight only lasted a few seconds, that means that everybody's gone. The perps are gone, and you're probably gone because you're hiding somewhere behind cover over here somewhere, way over here. And the reason why I made this video is to tell you guys about the 22 caliber pistol. Now we know that the 22 nowadays is getting better because of the fact that the rim, a lot of times you'd have duds and stuff like that, but they've done better with CCI mini mags and stuff like that, where the 22 is reliable to go off. And some pistols that they have today, they're making better and better pistols for the 22 caliber, but you still have revolvers. And of course over here you have the 9mm. Now the thing is that if you can train with, there's nothing wrong with laser training, there's nothing wrong with dry fire and stuff like that, but having real training, you have to admit, is a great thing, because you're getting out there, you have different terrain than your house, because I practice inside the house, so I'm not experiencing different types of terrain like woods and places that don't have a flat spot on them, and so you have to train in different terrains with the real ammunition so that you can know what the real ammunition is doing. Now there's nothing wrong with simulations and stuff, there's nothing wrong with that, but the real training is what you want to get. So if somebody's ordering bulk 22, for instance, this is how much you can train. This is just kind of like a sample that I made up here. Don't take it too seriously. Could be less, could be more. This is how much more you can train with 22 than you can with 9mm. Now, a lot of 9mm guys tell me all the time, oh, I train all the time. No, you don't. No, you don't, because a lot of you guys say you train all the time, but you don't. You know why? Because you run out of 9mm ammunition when you're training. You run out all the time. And the times when you run out, you're not able to get any feedback on what that bullet's doing on the target. Whereas somebody with a 22, you don't have any excuse why you can't be out there 3 days a week shooting 22, including myself, by the way. And I realize there's other factors like getting to a range, indoor, outdoor, costs money for gas to get there and stuff. I realize that. So you might have to do stuff indoors. But what I'm trying to make here is I'm trying to make a point here about training with 22 and not to let it go, as far as other people are saying it. Other schools, shooting schools and stuff like that, say you shouldn't use the 22. And you don't find any training schools that use the 22, because I don't know if it's profit that they make on the 9mm because they charge money in their classes, or they just want everybody to have 9mm, so you always have the same ammunition for everybody. Somebody needs a 9mm, you have the same caliber among all people. But wouldn't it be interesting if you had a 22 only school that used 22 long rifle, and you have manufacturers that make really good 22 pistols, and there are some out now, that can perform and that can last, where you can do a lot of shooting. And the shooting, what you're going to do, is going to be based on probability and not possibility. Probability is something that happens that happens almost all the time. Possibility would be something like this one right here. So, for instance, we can take this pile. We could say 9mm 22 38. Okay, all these guys survived their defense situation, but this guy here didn't survive his defense situation. So this is, let's say that this is 2501. Look at the difference. Okay. This proves that an armed citizen is very effective despite the fact that they don't train that often. Because what we believe is, according to Hollywood and television, that bad guys don't care about the resistance, that they're going to just fight anyway. And that's not true. Most of the time, these guys run. It's not like Hollywood where they stay around for a gunfight. They don't. They take off. So a lot of indoctrination by television, a lot of indoctrination based on even instructors for shooting schools. A lot of them have a lot of myths that they're pushing out among people based on, like I was saying, based on possibility and not probability. Meaning that what you're doing is you're training for this right here, that one out of the bunch right there. So what they're doing is they're saying something like this: since this guy lost, okay, let's say that the guy that lost out of these 2,500 gunfights, okay, let's say that the guy that lost with a 22. Well, there's just as much of a chance that this guy could lose with a 9mm. Why? Because what if this guy trains with the 22? Okay, what if this guy trains with the 22 and this accounts for a loss for the 9mm for the guy that doesn't train and doesn't have tactics? So this guy won his defense situation, say like with the 22. Let's say that he won with that. And let's say that this guy didn't win because he didn't train enough with his 9mm. So this is why you can't put caliber in this thing and make caliber like a thing of importance, because of the fact that if we have the data, like Claude Warner's defense research on defense situations with only the private citizen, not law enforcement, you'll find out that caliber really didn't matter a whole lot for these situations here. Now, a 9mm is as powerful as a 9mm, or a 9mm is more powerful than a 22. We know that. But it's who's behind the gun. That's what we have to understand. So when I pick this out of the crowd, the person that lost their defense situation, what I'm saying is the person that lost their defense situation could be somebody with a 22, could be somebody with a 9. I'm not saying that it's a person with the 9, and I'm not saying it's a person with the 22, but what I am saying is that if this guy is training with the 22 and this guy isn't training with the 9mm, the chances are that the guy that loses the gunfight is this guy right here. See? So once again, everybody's sometimes building a straw dummy argument where they're going to find one person that lost a defense situation with the 22, but they're not going to look and find just as many people that lost defense situation with the 9mm because of the recoil. They couldn't get on target, and stuff, different things like that about the 9mm, that they couldn't handle it, they didn't train with it, stuff like that. So that's why we have to understand that caliber doesn't matter as much as we think it does. Now, does a 9mm do more damage? Yes. 22 does less damage? Yeah. But the thing is you have to put that damage in the right spot, okay? If you have a 9mm like this and you don't have good shot placements, we can use Tim Grammons, for example, had a Glock 21 45 ACP, and he had a suspect that he shot with, I think, 3 or 4 magazines, 45 ACP, Spirit Cold Dot, 230 grain. And what they found is that at the end, what put the suspect down is he got shot in the heart a couple times and then in the head, and that was the last shots that he fired. Well, if that's true, then shot placement is key, okay? Shot placement is key, so it doesn't matter if you have a 9mm, it's more powerful, and you don't put the shots where they're supposed to go, you're wasting 325 foot-pounds of energy, whereas if you put 100 foot-pounds of energy times 2 or 3 bullets, that's equivalent to a 9mm. But the 22 caliber shots, if there's 3 of them hitting the heart, it could look something like that. So it could be even a bigger hole than 1 shot of the 9mm, or even 2 shots of 9mm if the holes are spread out like that. So in other words, you could take, if everything's equal and everything's done at the same speed, the 9mm and the 22 can pretty much do just the same thing in a way. because even though the 9mm is more powerful than the 22, it's about shot placement. And what we know about people is that even if a person gets hit, they respond differently. Like some people feel pain, some people don't feel pain despite the caliber. And the other thing is, if you guys deer hunt, you'll know that you can hit a deer with a 300 Winchester Magnum in the heart, and he can run. You take a Weaker 308, hit him in the heart, that deer might not run as much, which proves that everything responds differently. Even though there's more damage, it just depends on the deer. Same thing with the person. It depends on the person and how they respond to that round. Now, some guys aren't going to have pain. Some guys are going to have pain. But just because the 9mm is bigger than the 22, it doesn't mean that you have more pain with this one than you do this one, because the 9mm and the 22 are still going to sever nerves. And when you sever nerves, a lot of people have said that when they got shot, they didn't feel anything, because once the nerve gets severed, they probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a 9mm and a 22. So this whole nonsense about the 22 not being effective and not being something that you should train with is a bunch of baloney. And the thing is, a lot of these instructors want to push the 9mm on everybody because it's popular, and the sales or whatever they're doing in their classes, they want to, I don't know if they're selling them to the people that go to the classes, selling the boxes of ammo to them, or what's going on. But the thing is that what they're doing is, these instructors of these schools, what they're doing is they're trying to kick out the 22 and all these other calibers out of the schools. And I don't know of anybody right now that has a school that can train people with just 22s. And I think it's important that we bring that up. Another thing, I'll be off camera just for a second here. Another thing I want to say is revolvers, okay? When we talk about revolvers, the same thing that we find in research is that revolvers aren't the doom that we thought it was, because of the fact that everybody thinks a revolver, 357 Magnum, for instance, a small one, is like 5 shots. Is it really 5 shots? No. You got a speed loader. You got 2 of these. Now you got 10 shots. Now, reloading is slower. That's true, but you can train, okay? You can train to use these rounds the right way, using cover and going off these basics right here that prove that private citizens do well in their defense situations, but maybe even better if they train. So if they train, they won't end up being this one guy right here out of the bunch, the 2501. That would be him right there. So what we need is schools that can teach revolvers, and everybody in the school could go to the revolver part of the training or whatever. And people with 22s can go to the 22 part of the training. 9mm, that's most popular, so them are already established. But what we need to do is we need to stop telling people that a revolver is too old and that you can't use it for self-defense and all that stuff, when revolvers have a lot of advantages over semi-autos. And semi-autos have advantages over a revolver. So it's the yin and yang. If you know that martial arts principle of yin and yang, is that for every advantage, you'll have a disadvantage. So for a semi-auto advantage, there's always going to be a disadvantage. Same thing with the revolver. So in other words, we need to stop telling people that you can't use different platforms, that you can't use a revolver, that you can't use a 22 pistol, that you can't use a 9mm. And I want to see if there's anybody out there on YouTube land that can stop this nonsense and start schools right now with this right here, the 22 long rifle. Okay? Now I know what you're going to say, penetration and expansion. But once again, this is a break in contact, people. I'm not talking about the power of the 22. I'm not talking about the penetration and expansion. I'm talking about what we know by research is the fact that this is saving lives. Even though it's considered wimpy and small to people, even if it does only have 7 inches of penetration, look what it's doing. And the thing is that you can even go online and you can find out that for every 22 caliber that's, say, lost in a defense situation, you can find just as many 9 millimeter. Why is that? Several reasons. It's the skill of the person. Is he training? Maybe he isn't training with the 9, so he loses his defense situation. Maybe he's training with the 22, so he wins his defense situation. There's a lot of variables, okay? The variables of the bad guy within this 2,500 pile, most likely the bad guys, when they get hit, even if they don't get hit, they're going to take off. Why? Because they don't like resistance from an armed citizen. So, but my whole point today is to consider the 22 caliber, consider the revolver, and don't let anybody tell you anything different. Whatever you're confident using, even the old 9 millimeter, if you want to use your semi-auto, that's fine. I still carry a 9 millimeter. I still carry this. I still carry 22s. I carry it all. But don't let anybody tell you that this is the way to go, okay? Because it's not. According to defense research and stuff like that, this is a lot more expensive to use than a 22. So cost benefit analysis would lead you to believe that with this whole pile here, if you have chances to win with this, why not train with this so you can get real training? If you're a low budget person, everybody's always telling these low budget people that you have to buy 9 millimeter because you're going to save your life, so you have to buy them boxes of 9 millimeter because what really matters is your life, okay? But what they're not telling you is that, according to this research right here, that the 22 isn't a bad round for self-defense. So if you're a person low on money and you use a 22, don't ever let anybody tell you that you're doing the wrong thing, that 22 is not good for self-defense. You can even ask Claude Werner about this. You know, me and him, I think we texted a couple times on his YouTube channel. But the thing is even Claude Werner himself had said that it's a big misconception that people have about the 22 caliber as a self-defense cartridge. And the reason why they have misconceptions is because law enforcement has screwed everything up too, because what they did is law enforcement put their data in with this mix right here, and it corrupted the data because we don't want law enforcement in our data. We just want private citizen data so that we can tell what the private citizen needs and what the private citizen experiences, whereas law enforcement, they have to go chase people. We don't have to chase people. They have to do, say like warrants, they have to do traffic stops. We don't have to do that, which means we don't need the resources that law enforcement needs. We don't need the same kind of guns because everybody started mirroring law enforcement. And that's why everybody was going to 9 millimeter, because they wanted to mirror law enforcement. And law enforcement needs more resources. They need more ammunition. They need everybody to have the same caliber and stuff like that, because the department sometimes only allows you to have one caliber. So the 22, in the meantime, is bashed and made to look like something that it's not. Even one-shot stop studies, they never tell you where the shots hit with the 22. They just tell you that, like, you need 3 shots or whatever to stop somebody, but that's nonsense. You never see any of the data incidences, one by one incidents, so that you can look where these are the actual incidences. And even Claude Werner's got a big database on individual incidences, so he's able to see, you know, how effective the 22 was. And it's, like I said before, for every defense encounter where a 22 lost a battle, you can find just as many 9 millimeter, because it's not just about caliber. It's not just about expansion and penetration. It's about your training, your situational awareness. Same thing here, your training, situational awareness, tactics, and stuff, how you use cover, stuff like that. There's a lot of things that influence whether you win or lose. What kind of places are you going to? Are you going to bad neighborhoods when you shouldn't be there? Are you hanging around with the bad people? If you're hanging around bad people, then your chances of getting in a defense situation here is more likely. Now, are you going to survive? Probably, because of this. And if you're the guy that's out here, you have to ask yourself a question. Wouldn't you rather wouldn't you rather train more if you couldn't afford 9 millimeter? Wouldn't you rather train more with the 22 so that you know where your hits are going, so you don't have to be this guy? Okay. Now, if you guys have 9 millimeter and you have the money to train, go for it. But not everybody has that luxury of having money to afford 9 millimeter. So don't block out the 22 caliber. Okay. Don't block out the 20 caliber because it's not popular. And you shooting school instructors, shame on you for telling people that they shouldn't have a revolver for defense, that 22s are worthless for defense. You're all corrupt. You're all telling people the wrong thing. And people idolize you as gods. And people, think you're a guru and a god and stuff like that. And people are pretty much suckered into believing everything that every guru or every expert says online, that they never look into things for themselves and research themselves about what's truly going on and what the real truth is. Because a lot of this is bias. A lot of this is bias and feelings only, that you have to have a 9 millimeter and you cannot use a 22 because it doesn't make any sense. A lot of this is bias. A lot of this is listening to these cult members and gurus, and not necessarily cult members, but you know what I'm saying, where you can't disagree with them because, oh my gosh, you don't want to disagree with Wilson Combat. Oh my gosh, you don't want to disagree with Rogers Shooting School. Oh my God, you don't want to disagree with Masad Ayub. I mean, he's right all the time, isn't he? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You kind of, or Ken Hackathorn or whatever. The thing I like about Ken Hackathorn is he was very influential and the guy that really got the competition thing started. But even him now, I'm liking what he's saying about things that he found cracks and faults into the competition shooting sport, like I did. Like on my channel, I was mentioning things about accuracy and cover and stuff like that, making sure you have cover and you don't scoot out of your cover too quickly, because competition shooting sports, you're so amped up all the time, you want to skedaddle out of that cover. And when you get out of your cover, what you find out is in real life, if these two guys are armed and you come around your cover too fast, you might think that you can do a double tap on these guys. But what happens if you tap this guy twice and it's in the right area and this guy in the right area? What if this guy's still shooting at you? See what I mean? Wouldn't it be better to stay with your cover, make sure that this guy is incapacitated and not go so quickly around the corner and just go boom, 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 like you see on these competition shooting things? And I don't agree with that at all, because it's not according to this right here. If competition shooting sports was anything close to real life, then it would have to be probability, not possibility. Because anything's possible. A long shot is possible, and that's why we take long shots with our small guns once in a while, because in case you do have to make a long shot. But in competition shooting, one of the problems is they use all these different pieces of cover, and that's fine. But you need to concentrate on the basics. One piece of cover, you want to focus on one piece of cover. You don't necessarily have to have all these pieces of cover. When this shows right here that usually it's just one piece of cover, that the gunfight only lasts a few seconds. The gunfight doesn't last from this stage here to this stage to this stage to this stage. Now, is it a possibility? Yes, you might be in a possibility where you have to run stage to stage in a real gunfight. But the thing is most private citizens, they don't have to chase bad guys. They can just stay with cover, whereas law enforcement, you have to go stage to stage to stage because you're going after a bad guy. So we have to separate that. We have to separate the private citizen from law enforcement. We have to separate competition shooting from defensive shooting, which is totally different, and I can go on about that subject for probably 2 hours. So what we find with competition shooting here is, even though it's okay to do competition shooting, despite competition shooting, 2,500 people survived. Okay, another thing is caliber wasn't a factor. Okay, you guys, competition shooters have power factor and all that other stuff. Caliber wasn't a factor. Okay, capacity, no mag change. Competition shooters, In a real gunfight, you're probably not going to switch mags. Is it good to practice switching mags? Sure, but once again, it's right here. This is probability, and possibility is right here, where something weird happens out here, where you're going to have a lot of magazines and stuff like that when it's highly unlikely. So you want to train for the most common thing you want to train for. So too many mag changes, and I can verify this with Robert Keller, or Bob Keller was talking about. He noticed that people with AR-15s, they practice too many mag changes, and they do less shooting, which is to him is called ready up drills. And Bob Keller, you can look him up, say hi to him if you want for me in Minnesota, because that's where he's from. So gunfight was only a few seconds. Okay, so once again, competition shooter, gonna run around this course. Most gunfights only a few seconds. Is it possible, or is it possible that you could have something more than a few seconds? Sure, but a private citizen, it's going to end quicker because they don't have to chase anybody like law enforcement. Okay, capacity wasn't a factor. Okay, you got a 5-shot revolver, right? Competition shooters would laugh at this, at a guy that just has a 5-shot revolver and a speed loader. Like, oh my gosh, you're going to lose the gunfight, that kind of stuff, that nonsense. Okay, why? Because they're used to having lots of buckets of bushels of ammo underneath their gun like this. Put all the bullets in here, like, what is that, 500 rounds? Like as if it's some war or something. You know what I mean? At least one piece of cover. I've already talked about that. Competition shooters having all these cover positions all over the place, way too many. But should you train for it once in a while? Sure, but focus the training on that one piece of cover. That's the most important, is that one piece of cover in that one scenario that you're more likely to get into, except for, rather than this scenario out here, that's a possibility instead of a probability. We want to focus on what the probability is. Okay, within 7 yards. Okay, a competition shooter, he's running all over the place. Okay, it's only within 7 yards. So once again, I'm not saying don't take them long shots and don't practice further distances, but you want to focus all of your money on your ammunition and resources into that 7 yards. Okay, and perps flee. Okay, so whenever somebody's shooting, generally speaking, if these are two bad guys, usually they're going to leave just seeing the muzzle. Okay, if they see the muzzle, they're going to leave. Okay, one shot fired, they're probably going to leave. One shot fired hits a bad guy, he's probably going to leave. Penetration and expansion, okay, he doesn't have a tape measure, so he probably doesn't care. All he knows is he's been shot, and he doesn't even know what caliber it is, how much penetration, how much expansion. What does he care? All he wants to do is get to the hospital, and then he'll probably be arrested after he gets treated. So this is what I'm talking about, folks. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. But thanks for watching.